My name is Janita, and this is the story of how my life was turned upside down not once, but twice. I guess I should start from the beginning. I was born to loving parents, Robert and Linda David, in a small suburban town. My dad was a journalist and my mom worked as a nurse. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Life was pretty normal until I turned 14. Then, everything changed. It was a rainy Friday evening. My parents were driving home from a dinner party. I was at home with my grandma, watching some silly cartoon, when the phone rang. I'll never forget the chill that ran through me when I heard my grandma crying softly in the kitchen. The next few days were a blur. They told us my mom had died instantly in the crash. Dad survived, but just barely. When I finally saw him in the hospital, he was just a shadow of the man I once knew. His legs were crushed, and the doctor said he'd never walk again. "Janita," he whispered, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry." I didn't understand why he was apologizing. It wasn't his fault. A drunk driver had crashed into their car. But as I got older, I realized he was sorry for what our lives had become, for the struggles we would face, for the mother I had lost, and for the father he thought he could no longer be. But my dad, Robert David, was stronger than he gave himself credit for. After he got out of the hospital and adjusted to life in a wheelchair, he threw himself into his work. He had always been a talented writer, and now he focused all his energy on his job as an editor at the city's major newspaper. As I entered my teenage years, Dad made sure I had everything I needed. He encouraged me to join clubs, make friends, and live as normal a life as possible. But the truth was, I preferred spending time with him. We watched old movies together, argued about books, and he helped me with my homework. When it was time for college, Dad insisted that I go away to school. "You need to spread your wings, kiddo," he said. "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." I was hesitant, but I knew he was right. So, I went off to the State University of New York and studied accounting. That's where I met Sophia, who became my best friend. Through Sophia, I met her second cousin, Peter. Peter was kind and funny, and he didn't flinch when I told him about my dad. In fact, the first time he met Dad, they got along right away, bonding over their shared love of classic rock. Later, Peter told me, "Your dad is cool. And you're amazing for taking care of him all these years." I tried to play it off, but inside, I was glowing. For the first time since the accident, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could have a normal life. A life with love, laughter, and even a family of my own someday. After graduation, things started to fall into place like a puzzle. I got a job at the local tax service, and Peter started working as a long-haul truck driver. We dated for 4 years before he proposed to me, on a crisp autumn evening in the park where we had our first date. I was thrilled, but there was one thing I needed to make clear. "Yes, Peter, but I can't leave my dad. He needs me." Peter smiled wide and said, "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll all live together. Your dad's apartment is big enough for the 3 of us, right?" The wedding was small but beautiful. Dad insisted on wheeling himself down the aisle to give me away. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. As I stood there holding Peter's hand, I felt like I was living a fairy tale. But every fairy tale has its villains, and mine came in the form of my mother-in-law Melissa and my sister-in-law Amanda. From the moment I met them, I could tell they didn't approve of me. "So, your father is handicapped?" Melissa asked during our first meeting, wrinkling her nose like she smelled something foul. "He's disabled," I corrected, trying to stay calm. "But he works as an editor?" "How nice," she interrupted, clearly not interested. Then she turned to Peter and asked, "Are you sure about this? There are so many nice girls from good families." My face flushed with anger and embarrassment. But Peter immediately defended me. "Mom, Janita is from a good family. Her dad's disability doesn't change that. I love her, and that's all that matters." That shut Melissa up, but I could still see the disapproval in her eyes. Amanda, following her mother's lead, was just as cold towards me. After the wedding, true to his word, Peter moved in with Dad and me. Our life settled into a comfortable routine. I'd go to work at the tax office, while Peter was on the road for days at a time. When he was home, we'd all have dinner together. But whenever Melissa and Amanda visited, the atmosphere in our home changed. They acted like they owned the place, barely acknowledging Dad's presence. Once, I overheard Melissa whispering to Amanda, "It's a shame. Peter could have done so much better. Now he's stuck with this girl and her crippled father." He's stuck with this girl and her crippled father. What if they have children? Can you imagine the genes? I was furious, but I kept quiet for Peter's sake. I tried to keep the peace, but it was getting harder and harder. One evening, after a particularly tense visit from Melissa and Amanda, I broke down in tears. Peter found me in our bedroom, crying. Hey, he said, pulling me into his arms. "What's wrong?" "Your mom and sister," I sobbed. "They hate me. They think I'm not good enough for you, because of Dad." Peter's face hardened. "That's ridiculous. You and your dad are my family now. If they can't accept that, it's their problem, not ours." His words comforted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles with Melissa and Amanda. As the months went by, Peter's trucking business began to grow. He was always on the road, traveling across the country in his big rig. I missed him terribly when he was gone, but I focused on my work at the tax office and spent my evenings keeping Dad company. One crisp autumn evening, as I was helping Dad into bed, Peter called. His voice crackled with excitement over the phone. "Janita, I've been thinking," he said. "How would you feel about buying a townhouse? It would be easier for your dad to move around in a wheelchair. He could spend more time outside. Plus, you could have a garden, something to keep you busy when I'm on the road." The more he talked, the more I liked the idea. I glanced at Dad, who was pretending not to be eavesdropping. "What do you think, Dad?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker. Dad's eyes lit up. "A garden would be nice," he admitted. "And it would be easier to get outside." That settled it. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into house hunting. We finally found the perfect place, a spacious townhouse with wide doorways, a roll-in shower for Dad, and a beautiful backyard. Taking out a mortgage was scary, but with Peter's income, mine, and the rent from Dad's old apartment, we managed to make it work. We moved in on a sunny Sunday in spring. I'll never forget the look on Dad's face as he wheeled himself out onto our new patio. "This is perfect, sweetie," he said, his eyes misty. "Thank you." We spent the next few months settling in and making the place our own. I planted a small vegetable garden, and Dad would sit outside for hours, enjoying the sunshine and fresh air. It was peaceful, almost perfect. Then we decided to have a housewarming party. We invited friends, colleagues, and yes, even Melissa and Amanda. The party was in full swing when they showed up, fashionably late, as usual. They walked in, looking around with barely hidden envy. As we walked through the house, I could see Melissa eyeing things. When we reached the master bedroom, she turned to me with a sly smile. "You know, Janita," she said quietly, "this would be perfect for Peter and me. Why don't you send your father to a nursing home? Then I could move in here." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Excuse me?" I managed to say. "Oh, don't look so shocked," Melissa continued. "Your father isn't well. He's not a whole person anymore, is he? He doesn't need all this luxury. A nursing home would be more than enough for someone in his condition." Before I could respond, Melissa marched out to the patio, where Dad was talking with some guests. To my horror, she grabbed the handles of his wheelchair and started pushing him toward the driveway. "Melissa!" I shouted, running after her. "What are you doing?" "If he won't go to a nursing home," she sneered, "he can stay outside. That's what you wanted, isn't it? For him to be outdoors." I was shaking with rage and disbelief. Thankfully, Peter heard the commotion and came running. His face turned red with anger when he saw what his mother was doing. "Mom," he yelled. "What the hell are you doing? Let go of Robert's chair right now." Melissa looked shocked by Peter's tone. "But honey, I don't want to hear it." Peter cut her off. "You and Amanda need to leave. Now." After they left, Peter apologized over and over to Dad and me. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. I had no idea she would do that. I'm just so sorry. Dad reached out and patted Peter's hand. It's not your fault, son, he said gently. Some people just can't understand. Life settled into a new routine after that incident. Melissa and Amanda kept their distance, which was fine with me. Peter focused on his work, taking on more long-haul routes to help pay for our new home. I split my time between my job at the tax office, taking care of our home, and looking after Dad. For years passed quickly. Our life became comfortable and predictable. Peter was on the road most of the time, but when he was home, our little family was happy. Dad's health was stable, and he seemed content spending his days in the garden or working on his editing from home. Then came the call that shattered my world. I was at work when my phone rang. A man's unfamiliar voice greeted me. Mrs. Walker? This is Officer Jack from the Highway Patrol. My heart sank. Yes, I barely managed to say. I'm sorry to inform you that your husband, Peter Walker, has been in a serious accident. The rest of the conversation was a blur. Words like head-on collision and didn't make it floated around me, but I couldn't process them. It wasn't until I heard myself thanking the officer and hanging up that the reality began to sink in. Peter was gone. The next week was a fog of grief and disbelief. I went through the motions of planning the funeral like a robot, barely understanding what was happening. The day before the funeral, I gathered my courage and called Melissa. I thought she deserved to hear about her son's death from me, not from a newspaper obituary. Hello. Melissa's sharp voice answered. Melissa, it's Janita, I said, my voice trembling. It's about Peter. He's gone. There was an accident. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, to my shock, Melissa's voice came back, dripping with anger. This is your fault, she hissed. You made him work so hard, driving that truck to pay for your fancy house. You killed my son. I was stunned. Melissa, that's not. Save it, she snapped. I expect you to give him the best funeral money can buy. But don't expect a penny from us. You made your bed. Now lie in it. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. How could she be so cruel? How could she blame me for this? The day of Peter's funeral was gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. The church was full. Peter was well-liked in the community, and it seemed like half the town had come to pay their respects. But as I looked around during the service, I noticed Peter's mother and sister were nowhere to be seen. They hadn't even bothered to show up for their own son and brother's funeral. Dad reached out and squeezed my hand. It's their loss, sweetie, he whispered. We're family, and we'll get through this together. As we pulled into our driveway after the service, something seemed off. The lights were on in the house, which was strange, because I was certain I had turned everything off before we left. Did you leave any lights on, Dad? I asked, frowning. He shook his head. No. I don't think so. As we got closer, I noticed movement inside the house. My heart started pounding. Were we being robbed? On the day of Peter's funeral? I quickly helped Dad out of the car and into his wheelchair. My mind was racing. Should I call the police? But as we approached the front door, I heard familiar voices inside. A chill ran down my spine. I recognized them. I pushed open the door, and there they were. Melissa and Amanda were in our living room, surrounded by boxes and pieces of furniture. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my grief momentarily forgotten in the face of this outrageous intrusion. Melissa turned to me, her face a mask of fake sympathy. Oh, Janita, dear. We're just helping you pack up. After all, you can't possibly afford to keep this place now that Peter is gone. I was speechless. Amanda added, her voice sickeningly sweet. Don't worry. You can go back to your father's apartment. It's cozy. I could feel the anger building inside me. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now. Melissa had the nerve to look offended. This house belongs to us now. All of Peter's property does. We're his family, after all. Like hell you are, I exploded. Where were you today? At his funeral? Oh, that's right. You couldn't be bothered to show up. Melissa waved her hand dismissively. We were busy making arrangements. Now be a good girl and start packing. We'll meet you out by tomorrow. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These women hadn't shed a tear for Peter, hadn't even attended his funeral, and now they were trying to kick us out of our own home. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. Melissa and Amanda exchanged worried looks. Clearly, they hadn't expected me to fight back. Now, Janita, Melissa began, but I cut her off.
No.
You have exactly 10 minutes to get out of my house before I call the cops. This is my home. Peter and I bought it together. You have no right to be here. Maybe it was the steel in my voice or the fire in my eyes. But Melissa and Amanda finally realized they had gone too far. They gathered their things and left, but not before Melissa turned to me with a sneer. This isn't over, Janita. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. The days after Peter's funeral were a blur of grief, anxiety, and paperwork. I threw myself into sorting out Peter's affairs, partly to stay busy, and partly out of fear that Melissa and Amanda would try to take what wasn't theirs. A week after the funeral, I received a call from a local law firm. My heart pounded as I answered the phone, terrified it was Melissa following through on her legal threat. Mrs. Walker? A crisp, professional voice said. This is Scott Thompson from Thompson and Partners. I'm calling about your late husband's will. My breath caught. His will? I didn't know he had one, I whispered. Yes, ma'am, Mr. Thompson replied. Mr. Walker came to see us about 5 months ago. He asked that we contact you in the event of his passing. I scheduled an appointment for the next day. My mind was spinning. Why hadn't Peter told me about this? What did it mean? The next morning, I wheeled Dad into Mr. Thompson's office. The lawyer greeted us warmly, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Mrs. Walker, Mr. David, thank you for coming in, he said, gesturing for us to sit near his desk. I'm sorry for your loss. He opened a file on his desk. Now, as I mentioned on the phone, your husband came to see us to draft his will. He was very clear about his wishes. I held my breath as Mr. Thompson began to read. Now, as I mentioned on the phone, he said, glancing at the will in front of him, I, Peter Walker, being of sound mind, do hereby leave all my worldly possessions to my beloved wife, Janita Walker. I gasped, and Dad's grip on my hand tightened. This includes our home, my truck, and all our savings, Mr. Thompson continued. It is my wish that Janita use these resources to care for herself and her father, Robert David, whom I have come to love as my own. Tears streamed down my face. Even from beyond the grave, Peter was taking care of us. There's more, Mr. Thompson said gently. Mr. Walker left a letter for you. He handed me an envelope. With shaking hands, I opened it and began to read. My dear Janita, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry for leaving you and Robert. Please know that you two are the best thing that ever happened to me. I made this will because I know how my mother and sister can be. I didn't want to worry you, but I needed to make sure you and Robert were protected if anything happened to me. You're my real family, Janita, you and Robert.
Not them.
Take care of each other. Live your lives to the fullest, and know that I'll always be watching over you. All my love, Peter. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. Dad was crying too, his weathered hand patting my arm gently. Mr. Thompson gave us a moment before speaking again. Mrs. Walker, there's one more thing. Your husband's truck was insured. Given the circumstances of the accident, the insurance company will be paying out the full value of the policy. I looked up, sniffling. What does that mean? Mr. Thompson offered a small smile. It means you'll be receiving a large sum of money, enough to pay off your mortgage and more. As we left the lawyer's office, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. We were going to be okay. Peter had made sure of it. But peace didn't last long. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked on the street. My heart sank. It was Melissa's sleek sedan. Oh no, I muttered. What now? Sure enough, Melissa and Amanda were waiting on our front porch. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had Peter's letter in my pocket, and the strength of his love in my heart. Janita, Melissa began as we approached, her voice sickly sweet. We need to talk about Peter's estate. I stood tall, looking her straight in the eye. No, Melissa, we don't. She blinked. Peter left everything to me. It's all legal and official. And do you want to know why? Because we were his real family.
Not you.
Now, please leave. You're trespassing on my property. For once, Melissa was speechless. Amanda tugged at her arm, whispering urgently. With one last venomous glare, they got in their car and drove away. The weeks after our meeting with the lawyer were busy. I threw myself into settling Peter's affairs, grateful for the distraction from my grief. The insurance payout came through, and just as Mr. Thompson had said, it was enough to pay off our mortgage, with plenty left over. One afternoon, as I was going through Peter's desk, I found a small notebook. Curious, I opened it. Inside were pages filled with his messy handwriting. It was a journal, full of thoughts, goals, and dreams for our future. Thinking about starting a college fund for our future kids. One entry read, "Want to make sure they have the best start in life." My heart clenched. We had talked about having children someday, but decided to wait until we were more financially stable. Now, reading Peter's private hopes and dreams, a fresh wave of grief washed over me. "Oh, Peter," I whispered, holding the notebook close. We had so many plans. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. My mind kept drifting to the journal, to the future we'd never have. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of Peter. He was smiling, holding out his hand to me. "It's okay, Janita," he said softly in my dream. "Everything's going to be all right." I woke up the next morning feeling different. I couldn't quite explain it, but something had changed. As I got ready for work, a wave of nausea hit me. I barely made it to the bathroom in time. The morning sickness didn't go away in the days that followed. At first, I thought it was just stress and grief. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered something else. After a week of this, I found myself in the pharmacy, staring at pregnancy tests. With trembling hands, I bought one and hurried home. The 5 minutes I waited for the result felt like the longest of my life. When I finally looked at the test, there were 2 clear blue lines. I sank to the bathroom floor, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions, joy, fear, grief, and hope, all swirling together. "Janita?" Dad's voice came through the door. "Everything okay in there?" I opened the door, tears streaming down my face. His expression changed from concern to alarm. "What's wrong, sweetie?" he asked. I held up the test, my hand shaking. "I'm pregnant, Dad." He pulled me into his arms as I broke down in sobs. He held me, stroking my hair the way he used to when I was a little girl. "It's okay," he murmured. "It's going to be okay. You're not alone, Janita. And this baby is a gift. A piece of Peter that will live on." His words hit me deeply. This baby was a part of Peter, a continuation of our love. Suddenly, the fear began to fade, replaced by a strong, undeniable determination. "You're right," I whispered. The days that followed were filled with cautious hope. I went to my doctor, confirmed the pregnancy, and began preparing for the journey ahead. Dad was thrilled, more supportive than I could have ever imagined. He started reading parenting books, fixing up a nursery, and even began knitting a tiny yellow blanket. As my belly grew, so did my strength. Each morning, I'd sit in the garden, the one Peter had promised me, and talk to the baby about their father. I told him how kind he was, how much he loved classic rock, how he made the best pancakes, and how he always held my hand when I was scared. One sunny afternoon, as I was watering the garden, I saw a car pull up. My heart dropped. It was that same silver sedan. Melissa and Amanda stepped out, looking strangely nervous. I stood, instinctively placing a protective hand over my swollen belly. They walked up the path, fake smiles plastered on their faces. "Janita," Melissa began, her voice missing its usual sharpness. "We need a favor. We've hit some hard times. We were wondering if we could stay in your father's old apartment, just until we get back on our feet." I blinked at her, stunned by the audacity. After everything they had done, they wanted help? I'm sorry, I said, my voice firm but calm. That's not possible. Amanda's eyes flicked to my belly, and her face twisted with shock and disgust. You're pregnant, she spat. Already? You little prostitute. I can't believe you found a new man already. Peter's body isn't even cold. The words stung, but I stood still, my spine straight, my gaze steady. I didn't find a new man, I said quietly. This is Peter's child. Melissa's expression froze. I continued, and even if it wasn't, my personal life is none of your concern. Now, I think it's time for you both to leave. Melissa looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my tone must have stopped her. Amanda tugged her arm. With a glare that held no power anymore, they turned and left. I watched them drive away, feeling no hate, only peace. The months passed. With every heartbeat I heard in the doctor's office, with every tiny kick inside me, I felt more alive. I still missed Peter terribly, but he had left me a piece of him, a legacy. Dad was my rock through it all. He even built a wooden crib by hand. It creaked a little, but it was perfect. Then, on a crisp morning in early spring, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. We named him Miles Peter Walker. He had Peter's eyes. As I held him for the first time, all the pain, the loss, and the struggle seemed to melt away. My father sat beside me, tears in his eyes, holding his grandson's tiny hand. Life was never the same again, but it was full of love. Our little family of 3 was stronger than ever. The house echoed with laughter and late-night lullabies. And when I looked at Miles, I saw not only my son, but the reminder that love, true love, doesn't end. It transforms. Even in loss, there is hope. Even in heartbreak, there is rebirth. And even after goodbye, love finds a way to stay.